Hi everyone, so I'm Vivien Deparday. I come from the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery from the World Bank, in called GFDR. And so there at GFDR, there's like three kinds of activities. One is GFDR is managing funds for resilience and for climate adaptation. Another one is GFDR as a World Bank and globally does advocacy around promoting approaches and best practices around resilience and disaster risk management. And finally, there are teams, technical teams that provide technical assistance to other World Bank teams around various issues like post-disasters, methodology, better use of data, innovation. And so I'm part of one of this team called Innovation Lab, where we use innovation in open data and apply it to the challenge of resilience. So basically, we do that through a project called Open Data for Resilience Initiative. And this project started in 2011 because we realized there was a lot of wasted opportunities. There were data that were bought and were lost somehow, and sometimes expensive data. There was also sometimes when you want to assess risk in a country, like look at assets and where are the hazard-prone area, you might realize the data doesn't exist. So how do we kind of do better in all of this data management and innovation? So really, Open Data for Resilience tries to apply open data, open source, open standards, and open communities to really empower local government and people locally to really be able to take these tools and data and be able to bounce off and be more resilient. So here, today I will talk a little bit how we use OpenStreetMap in those projects and kind of how we try to make it sustainable. So I don't know I think a lot of you may have seen this before, but you might guess where it is. This is Kathmandu Valley, and here, I guess the GIF doesn't work, but that still will make my point, is that this is before the earthquake in April 2015, and you can see there's already a lot of mapping that has been done. You can see a big blob of light on the right, which is Kathmandu, and then if the GIF was working, you could see animated all the roads coming in and covering larger area. But so how did we get there to have kind of this good local contribution and remote contribution before the disaster and during the disaster? I think he really didn't like the GIF. Well, and it's in Dutch, so you could do it if it was in French, but okay, I'll just restart the presentation, I think. I don't know if it doesn't.
Do you want to switch to your computer?
Does it start here?
F5.
Oh, I was on the wrong button. Okay. So how were the local and global community able to do that during the response? Because there was a local organization called Kathmandu Example there who was able to provide kind of an area of interest that needed to be mapped, was able to provide training to locally around how to print maps, how to use data offline, doing validation, and doing coordination. And this team started because in 2012, it's known that Kathmandu and the Kathmandu Valley is a very seismically risky zone, and so wanted to look at schools and resilience of schools. So needed a database of school with all the characteristics around the material, roof type, profile of the building, and so we needed the data to do that. And so on a normal project, usually you might hire a consultant or a firm to go out and get the data. It's kind of a one-off collection. Then the data comes back on a hard drive. Maybe another consulting company will use it to do the modeling, and then sometimes it's still like shared in some way, but often it's not shared. And so instead of doing that, we went and tried to use OpenStreetMap based on experience from Haiti post-disaster, but also from Indonesia, where OpenStreetMap was starting to be used as a pre-disaster tool. And really here, by using OpenStreetMap, we can have a collaborative approach where we go beyond the end product of the data. We'll be able to build local community, build capacity, build trust in the data, and really all these things lives beyond our project and then can be picked up by other projects or by local organizations or local businesses. And all this connection that we start to make can also live beyond a given project or individual organization. So over the years, in 4 or 5 years, we've been working now in about 20 to 30 countries if we count regional projects. Not all on OpenStreetMap, also on open data policies, on using GIS software. And so from that experience, and from the experience of the partners, we've been working a lot with a lot of people here, like HOT has been one of the main partner, State Department, American Red Cross, USAID, and others. And so here we wanted to kind of take this lesson learned experience, how can we be more efficient at having successful projects and build sustainable capacity and community in the process. Oh, another bug. Well, I guess I will use the other computer.
Fill in about Kathmandu. I'm less experienced about that. I did get a message from a friend at about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. He does stuff in the pool with his research, and it was, what can we do to help? And I was like, well, first of all, I've got to wake up. We'll see what we want to do. I was like, oh wow, there's a group out there in Kathmandu actually already doing OpenStreetMap. So I wanted to go in touch with him. I then got him and said, hey, this is what we can do. Get on the tasking manager. I've shown you it once. You should do it now. And he got his master's students to do some mapping too.
Oh, coming back. Okay. So first we kind of developed recently, actually, based on all of the experience, kind of basic principle of engagement, which are a bit more high level because we don't do only OpenStreetMap, but some of them might be familiar with you, like open by default and accessible license and documented data. Open by default is because he might have had this experience, it's on the data, is there. If it was no agreement made beforehand, it would be a lot harder to get it off someone's hard drive or some institutions if you didn't agree beforehand. So it's important to think about those at the design of the project. And another one is also accessible. It's a well-known example of a PDF where you may have multi-million-dollar data just as a PDF format, which is a bit frustrating. And then where OpenStreetMap really is shine is the co-creation and local ownership of the data. So being able to build local capacity, build trust in the data, and really build local ownership of the data over time. And finally, we interact with many different types of users, from the scientists to the local community, so we need to package this information in tools in different ways. And second, this process, so that was about the data, and now kind of about the process. We always try to engage the user communities to define the needs, but also to engage them in developing the tools, customizing the tools, developing partnership, not necessarily traditional partnership, but between local OSM community with a government institution, with a university, and so on. Prioritizing open source software like the OpenStreetMap community, because it really empowers the local community with a low barrier of entry to use the data. And then this is not kind of a quick fix. It really requires a change of mindset and a long-term engagement. I think most of the places we've got good success after 2 or 3 years of working in a place. And so that was kind of high-level principle. And then we also developed a guide to kind of consolidate more of a step-by-step approach of how we design projects. And this is really because we're just a handful of people coming to the conference and meeting up in various places, but really just at the World Bank there is 10,000 people, so we need to kind of get the word out there and get the methodology out there in other institutions and other places. And so with HUT and other partners that I mentioned before, we try to develop a guide on how we do that. And now we actually put the guide also recently on GitHub, so it's open to contribution, it's openly licensed. It's actually just called Planning a Mapping Project with OpenStreetMap. And so in this guide, there's a different part. Today I won't really go around the technical part of how you do the mapping. I think a lot of you know how to do the mapping, although it's the most fun part, I think. But we'll go a bit around the sustainability aspect and the project design. So here is kind of how we broke it out, kind of a planning phase, a preparation, a mapping, and using it. And so first, in the planning phase, you really want to make sure you do something realistic, assess your local partners, the size of the project, and also we always try to anchor it in a larger project. At the World Bank, we're working with the World Bank project, but really to have a goal that's just not mapping for the sake of mapping. And in this process, the partnerships are really key, because as I mentioned, these are things that are kind of staying longer than the project. And also at each stage of a project, you might work with different people. Some people might help you provide staff or workspace. Some people might provide like scientific kind of experts. And so there's different type of partners you can look at. And so we work with OpenStreetMap communities, government, local universities, and local OSM communities and scientific communities. So I'll go a bit faster because with all these incidents, I'm already at 5 minutes. So I'll just use 2 examples. So the Kathmandu example, the idea was to have plans to retrofit buildings and so get data around those buildings. And in Sri Lanka, where we worked in 2 river basins, the idea was also to support risk assessment and identification of investment for climate resilience, as well as supporting local disaster management centers. And so in these 2 countries, we partners with a government agency, mainly in Sri Lanka, and in Kathmandu, it's interesting too, because NSET, which is a really expert organization in seismic risk, was involved in designing the data model and the project. And so in each of those, we had precise objective, what kind of attribute we wanted to collect, what type of area, and to really have a goal, a set goal at the beginning. And so here, I will not go over the execution, but it involved a lot of field papers, as you can see, stacks of them. Now it involves drones, mobile app, GPS, and a lot of people from all around the world, formal training. And I think you know that part. So here to execute this, we had a slightly different model. In Sri Lanka, we worked with a local company and World Bank consultant, and with the local government made available 1 staff per admin area to work on the project, and so they were doing the data collection in collaboration with the team. And in Kathmandu, it was driven by universities and volunteers, supervised by the local team and NSET. And so we had great success. In Kathmandu, we were able to collect all the schools and hospitals that are on the map here. And in Sri Lanka, we did 2-phase project. And first time we collected about 30,000 buildings, all of them with characteristics. So you can start looking at the different kind of vulnerabilities of the building and the structure. And the second time we collected about 100,000 buildings, also just working with the local government and the local team. And so this is just 2 examples. There's many other examples from us and from other organizations now with like MSF and American Red Cross and others were also kind of following this methodology. Okay, and so then we're really trying to fit that and streamline that into the processes of the design project to really use the data to inform decision. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not, the data project is one part of it, but I think the most important part of it is all these local communities and local capacity that is built during the process in all the various countries. And so I guess one of the things in the summary of the talk was around sustainability of these communities. So when we do this kind of project, there might be a tension between getting a product and a deliverable for a project, but also the need to build a community and a sustainable effort. And so how do we do that? How do we take this opportunity of this one project to build something that lasts longer? And what kind of are the best practices? So these are kind of just ideas, some to be further developed, some that we saw through experience. So first on the individual level, I think a lot of the motivation comes around getting skills and learning, and then we have a lot of examples, I think, around people getting then hired by either a government agency, a private sector, or starting their own business through the skills they learn in the project, which is always a very nice outcome and a potentially life-changing experience. And also sometimes it's simpler. In Sri Lanka, for instance, we managed to work with the local community because they were really interested in routing. They really wanted to use the apps to be able to navigate around Sri Lanka because Google Map is not good there. So they were coming to mapping parties to teach others how to map. And finally, I think something that might be neglected a little bit is that we often train on mapping, but then to make it sustainable, you need other skills than mapping. You might need to write grant application, you might need to have just personal development aspects. So I think it's something that, as I said, there might be tension between getting a map done, but I think we should think about integrating more of those into project design too. And so, and also I think one key of the success is that we have numerous examples where then this local community, where we started to work in Bangladesh, we found 2 or 3 people, same thing in Nepal and so on, and then other organizations like Red Cross or MSF came and were able to hire the same people and create this link over time between different organizations, whereas before, each organization would have gone after the other, likely mapped 2 or 3 times the same place, and no one would have even known about it. So at the organizational level, then how do we support this kind of local organization to kind of thrive and continue? I think one part is really the kind of a classic local chapter approach, creating community connection in the country, but also and mailing lists and making sure these local communities are linked to the international communities. Then something we talked about, we haven't tried, but I know a couple of people mentioned it to me recently several times, like kind of a small grant system, because a lot of the local organizations don't need much to actually do a lot of work. So having an easy way to kind of give a small amount of money to keep the organization going. And then there is, I think, also something we haven't done very well and be interesting to hear, which is more around business development and need for economic models, because at the end of the day, everyone has to live. And if OpenStreetMap isn't a good opportunity to do that, how can we help create like better economic model around the use of OSM and help write grants, help work with even create private companies and so on. And finally, I think the diversity of this community is also very important. I think in a lot of countries, actually, I've seen in Madagascar and Niger, there are already organizations with like women in technology that are really interested in OpenStreetMap, and I think it would be important to support those two more specifically to create a more diverse community. So just a couple examples, I guess, not all from different people around here. The Kathmandu Living Dimension in Haiti, like Fred Moine, I was talking with him yesterday, and after like, I guess 5 years now, there's like a local organization that offers clear services around drone mapping, OpenStreetMap, and so on, and now they're getting hired, whereas coming from very tough areas of AT. So they really define a clear offer, a price, and then they're able now to go and talk to agency and institution to sell themselves and sell their services. And MapKibera is another example that was done by Ground Truth initiative. Finally, at the institutional level where we work the most, so I think some important part here is really building trust in the data. So we often do independent quality assessment where we involve technical partners and scientific partners, and even, for instance, Sri Lanka, the survey department of Sri Lanka itself did the quality assessment of the data we collected. And then I think the role of universities is very key. I think now there's Teach OSM, use mappers, and I think using really creating reusable curriculum that we can hand off to universities to be able to create more, to have more people trained, because often we might rely on 2, 3, 4 people, but often they go do a PhD, a master's, they get hired, and then it's still very fragile ecosystem. So I think training more students in the university is really key. So I think there is a great example of that already with like in the US. I think there's been good effort, for instance, at GW to integrate OSM in the curriculum, and also overseas in Indonesia, in Kathmandu, where in Sri Lanka too, where universities are starting to teach OSM. And finally, I think the government aspect, that takes the most time, I think, but we've been successful now in quite a few places. For instance, in Malawi now there's a purely government-led mapping initiative. In the Philippines, the same thing. So after a couple of years, you start getting traction. And I guess these are just reflecting those. Can we measure the sustainability? I think these are just ideas that reflects how we build that sustainability. And so finally, yeah, I guess that's it. And we'd love our team and partners to collaborate more on how can we push further those approaches and have more methodology to make those projects more successful and build more local communities. Yeah.
Thank you, Vivien. There's a lot to it, and we've just heard from 2 different communities, kind of one re-energizing and one where you gain people, but both it's important for the community to be their map. It's our map, it's their map, it's everyone's map. Do we have any questions for Vivien? Here we go, off I run again. Boop, boop, boop.
It's a logistics question. Hi, Vivien. Thank you so much for this. I just want to see the link again for the GitHub. Thank you.
Okay, if you go on the GFDR repository, it's just a GitHub page for now. It's really hard to create a domain name as a World Bank. So.
I'm going to move here and just say something to the video feed.
Oh, sorry.
If you've got questions and you're watching the video feed, go on the website, 2016.stateofthemap.org, go to the program, find the talk that's speaking, and there's a comment section using Discus. I checked, there's currently no questions there, so I'm going to quickly throw out for one more question before our next speaker. Do we have no question? Maybe not. Shall I just refresh the page that I've said if anyone's put a question there? It's hard juggling all these things that I've got. All right, let's see if anyone has a question here or if someone's going to shout at me first. No comments. I think we'll go from talking about community to we now got Lucas, who I believe is in the room. Are you here, Lucas?